Hola, buenos días, soy Nico. And today we're here to finish off another wonderful week's worth of content. Well, yes, excuse the delay. I was actually going over all the details for this video because it was actually very intricate and fairly serious. So before we get started, if you like this kind of content, make sure to follow me on Patreon at patreon.com/Nicosaesthetics for more exclusive videos, weekly live stream to be a part of the live streams, or we have multifaceted conversations with a varied panel depending on the week. If that sounds interesting to you, definitely tune in. Last video's comment was basically over the whole Arquez and Muscleback King situation, and someone basically said, once I saw the GoFundMe, I knew that they were entirely unserious and that this wasn't actually going to go anywhere. And I completely agree. It was just a bunch of people trying to call my bluff and punk me when I always bring receipts and I'm never just talking out of the side of my neck. But now that we got that out of the way, let's get started on the actual video. Today we're going to be talking about a performer called Dillon Faze, who is a YT performer. It's actually fairly rare that I come across white content creators that are actively speaking about what's happening in the industry. So when I was sent this into the DMs, I decided to look into it. Dillon Faze is basically claiming that a very popular performer known as Jordan Starr and his husband Brian, who is essentially his 50-year-old manager who handles everything behind the scenes, basically invited him out to America for a content creator based trip that they were going to fund and promised him so many things, and then it quickly took a downward spiral. Before we get into that, first I want to say, apparently Brian, who is Jordan Starr's husband, who is of 50 years of age, is allegedly the one behind all of his pages, behind all of his interactions. Essentially, Dillon said basically, if you are texting Jordan, if you are on the phone with Jordan, if you are sending him pictures, if you are arranging collaborations, it is actually Brian behind the scenes holding all of these actual interactions, meaning that you're not paying to interact with Jordan Starr, you're paying to interact with his 50-year-old husband, Brian. These are all things that Dillon is alleging. Then he goes on into detail, basically bringing receipts when he was saying that throughout the trip to America, after he landed in Ohio and he left most of his luggage there, he then went with them on a trip to, I believe, Fire Island. From there, he said the first week of the trip was actually good because he stayed with a friend, but once he actually began to stay with Jordan and his husband Brian, things took a left turn, seeing as how Brian continuously made comments about Dillon's physical appearance and him being allegedly overweight. That is what he was saying, to the point that it made him begin to feel insecure and question his own body image. And when he asked Jordan Starr to please ask his husband to stop making comments saying that he needed to lose weight or that he should just stop going to the gym altogether because he's not making any progress, Jordan allegedly refused, per Dillon's words. So from there, after berating and demeaning him from his accounts, he said that when it was time to actually work, he was continuously called lazy and he needed to get off of his fat, lazy behind because he needed to do more collaborations on this trip or else it wouldn't be worth it. So, feeling the pressure, even though he normally has a routine he goes through before he collaborates with people, Dillon decided to start collaborating with people on the trip, and he accidentally set up 2 collaborations on the same day. From there, he said, Brian began to berate him that he had to collaborate with the host that they were staying with first instead of the other person, because Dillon said, I would rather collaborate with the smaller top than the larger one first, meaning I would like to start small and just work my way up, seeing as how that would actually help me lead into the scene, which makes logical sense. But Dillon then brought back proof from his conversations with Jordan Starr in the DMs, where it was actually Brian talking, where Brian basically guilt-tripped him and blackmailed him, saying either you do what I say or you're cut off and I'm abandoning you in Fire Island, even though you are a tourist from England and you have no idea where you're at and your luggage is still in Ohio. It's either my way or the highway. Max is our guest and you're going to collaborate with him first. I don't care if he's larger. It's disrespectful to collaborate with somebody before you collaborate with him, even though it's literally back to back. It's disrespectful because you're his guest and we're here in his home and you're either going to do it or you're out. So he begrudgingly agreed to do the reverse scene, basically starting with the larger partner and then moving on to the smaller partner. And even then, he was continuously berated and told, you're going to continue to do things the way I want you to do them, or I'm done with you and you're being abandoned in Fire Island. He brought back evidence of this. I can't say that part didn't happen. He brought the screenshots. So from there, he said, I either had to bite my tongue and just try to survive the rest of the week so I can get back to Ohio to get my things and go home, or I'm just completely abandoned in the middle of Fire Island with none of my belongings, so I was trapped. And unfortunately, these types of situations tend to happen in the industry. Hell, these types of situations tend to happen in reality, where people will promise you a dream, people will promise you a trip, they'll promise you opportunities, and as soon as you are within grasp, they will switch up on you once they have the upper hand and or control in the scenario. He then began to say, well, why are you coming out a year later after all this happened? And he said, honestly, it was just because I did not feel safe opening up about this, seeing as how Jordan Starr is an international popular performer, and Brian has a lot of connections in the industry, seeing as how he's even starting his own award show, the ICCA Awards, the International Content Creator Awards. I had to look that up. Basically saying this man has a lot of pull. A lot of people have the same experiences with him and have gone through the same troubles that I have gone through trying to just work with him. And I don't think it's right that he has the ability to blackmail and manipulate people like this and no one is speaking out. So I just wanted to put his story out there, seeing as how it was a lengthy read. And the reason I decided to talk about what he said is going on behind the scenes is because he brought his receipts. He brought the screenshots of the conversations with Jordan Starr's page, where he's basically demanding that he do it his way or the highway and not giving him any actual bodily autonomy. Because when he told Brian, it is my body, it's my choice on who I film with first, seeing as how I'm not even saying I'm not going to film with Max. But he was told, if it's your body and your choice, then you can get abandoned in the middle of a foreign country after you left your luggage in a completely different state and you don't know where you're going or what to do. So he said once he actually got back to Ohio, Brian then drove him to the airport because he demanded that he get a flight to Las Vegas because he was no longer going to be dealing with this. He essentially said that the car ride to the airport went as great as you could possibly expect, that it was awkward, no conversation, Brian didn't say a word, and after he dropped my luggage off onto the ground, he sped off. And that was our last time communicating. So now that we have all this at hand, where do we go from here? Because I'm not going to do the whole victim blaming thing, seeing as how this man was promised a work trip and he actually came to work, and the first thing that happened to him was he was berated and manipulated to do things he wasn't willing to do, or wasn't willing to do in that order, seeing as how he was still going to collaborate with the host. But I also think it's important to remember of, why didn't you leave? First, he's an England native. Second, he landed in Ohio and they got flown out to New York City, and most of his luggage was left in Ohio. So even if he didn't want to comply and was like, you know what, I'm just going to leave, I'm just going to do what I need to do to get home, most of his luggage and his belongings is no longer with him. So he has no way to properly return home with everything he has. So I definitely understand the conflict of, what do I do in this situation where someone is basically demanding things of me and I have no way to actually stand up for myself? And unfortunately, once again, this happens a lot in reality. And this isn't victim blaming, because I don't really see a way you could properly navigate that if one of the largest performers in the world said, hey, I want to work with you, you should come out, you should come film with me. And then it was kind of a setup because of their boyfriend behind the scenes. But this is what Dillon is claiming that happened. These are the evidence at hand. And I definitely want to hear your opinions down below. Have you heard about these sort of scenarios, not only in the industry, but in person? Because I know a lot of people, when the whole flued out culture happened, they would fly out to meet these strangers and then they would be met with expectations that they either did not want to comply with or they didn't know would be expected of them, usually in the physical kind of reciprocation. But with that being said, before I continue to ramble, I'll leave the conversation up to y'all, and I'll see you guys next time. Boop. And now for a brief yet sincere shout out to this week's third eye tier subscribers, Leland T and Corey S. Your continued support is greatly appreciated, and thank you once again to everyone who supports the channel. In this week's live stream, discussion will be over flued out culture and the complications that can come with relying on someone to take care of your well-being while on a trip. If that sounds interesting to you, definitely tune in. Dillon said if you are texting Jordan, if you are phone Jordan, if no, paying to interact with his 50-year-old husband. You're paying to all Dillon's alleges. But then he goes into detail, basically explaining why the trick. No. This only happens when I'm recording, by the way. Like, fire trucks, they don't really come around the street unless I'm sitting down to record. But yeah, he essentially said